Enjoy the company sweatshirt and gift card, she said. All nasal and smug like her Botox hadn't settled right and was choking out basic empathy. That was how I knew it was happening. Caitlin, the CEO's nepotism experiment in overpriced flats, was firing me in front of the whole damn company. There was no warning, no written notice, no can we chat in private, just a bright performance during our quarterly all-hands, right between announcements about the new kombucha flavors and the Q3 burn rate. I stood there on the riser, hands folded, watching her pretend to read from a script she definitely didn't write. Lawrence has been a valued member of the Viron family. She cooed like she wasn't about to butcher me with a grin. But due to performance misalignment and shifting culture priorities, we've decided to part ways. She reached into one of the stupid culture crates we give to interns and pulled out a sweatshirt. My name was scribbled on the tag in Sharpie like I was a lost and found item. Tucked inside was a $50 gift card to a juice bar that doesn't even exist in my zip code. Oh, she added like she forgot. And unfortunately your Q4 bonus didn't meet the updated KPI rubric, so it won't be awarded. Updated KPI rubric. Lady, I wrote the original KPI rubric. I spent 8 years at this company building the entire operational pipeline from scratch. I knew every line of code, every vendor agreement, and every single employee's desk phone extension. I could feel 46 heads swivel in slow motion, their eyes burning holes into my cheap suit. Sales guys awkwardly tugged at their collars, suddenly finding their shoes fascinating. The intern row pretended to check their phones, their thumbs moving at lightning speed on Slack. The only one who didn't flinch was our CFO, whose expression read, "Don't drag me into this, I already bought a boat and signed the papers, so." I smiled. That same calm, "Don't worry, I won't sue" smile that HR people fear deep in their crunchy granola souls. I took the sweatshirt like it was radioactive, held it up, felt its weird, scratchy polyester judgment. "Thanks for the memories," I said. My voice was steady, even friendly, not because I wasn't furious, but because fury is for amateurs, and I'm a professional who knows how to wait for the right moment. Caitlin's little theater of humiliation had just ended, and she looked thrilled with herself, probably thinking she'd just cleared the biggest obstacle in her path to absolute control. I walked out of the presentation room without slamming a single door. That was important. They want a meltdown. They want a crazy old man story to pass around Slack like a meme to justify their actions. I gave them absolutely nothing to work with. Just a quiet click of my heels on the hardwood floor and the faint smell of vanilla air freshener, trying to cover up the rot of a failing startup. Here is what no one noticed in their rush to get back to the free bagels. HR didn't have me sign a single thing, no exit packet, no NDA reminder, no document acknowledging that my termination was fair and legal. Just a cheery, pre-written automated email that landed in my inbox 5 minutes later, saying my email would be deactivated by 3 p.m. and wishing me good luck in future endeavors. That was because they knew deep down, or at least someone in that room knew, this wasn't clean. Caitlin had been gunning for me since she first oozed into the role of Chief Culture Officer 10 months ago. That role basically meant she was a professional bruncher with access to payroll and a corporate credit card. She didn't like that I had real influence. She hated that I had history with the original founders, and she despised that people actually trusted me. When I flagged a few inconsistencies in the Q2 budget, like $18, 0 labeled wellness experiences that mysteriously mapped to her Palm Springs bachelorette party, HR told me to focus on positive forward momentum and synergy. And now here we were, the legacy guy escorted out by the nepotism hire. I walked straight past the glass offices, where executives pretended not to look up from their spreadsheets. Past the break room where someone was slicing a celebratory cake for another successful quarter we hadn't actually achieved. Past the front desk where the office manager offered me a pity smile. Outside, the Palo Alto sky was a cheerful mockery, blue, breezy, and completely indifferent to the corporate execution that had just taken place. I sat in my car, turned on the air conditioning, and stared at that stupid sweatshirt. Then I popped the trunk, tossed it in with the spare tire, and pulled out my personal laptop. The one I never logged into from company Wi-Fi, the one with a very specific file stored on a very specific encrypted partition. The file was titled Clause 12.7b, Trigger PDF, because Caitlin may have fired me, But I was the one who held the key to the tech stack, and she had no idea what she'd just done. 3 weeks before the sweatshirt hit the fan, I sat in a booth at a bar that smelled like old fries and cheaper secrets. Laptop open, glass of cheap Pinot balancing dangerously close to the edge of the sticky wooden table. Across from me was my attorney, a real one, not the corporate yes-men Viron trots out when someone needs to feel heard. Sarah Jenkins, 42, was cynical as hell and wore pearls like they were brass knuckles. She leaned over my screen, adjusted her glasses, and whistled through her teeth. "You sure you want to do this, Lawrence?" I sipped my wine and nodded slowly. They've been treating me like an employee they can discard, but I've been acting like an owner who keeps the lights on. It's time I got some insurance. The insurance in question was a licensing clause buried so deep in our vendor consolidation contract, it practically wore camouflage. See, while everyone was focused on our flashy UX updates and the new sales funnel integrations, I had spent 6 months cleaning up our back-end spaghetti code, rebuilding the company's operational spine. The problem was that spine wasn't proprietary. We'd been Frankensteining together third-party tools, patching them like the tech version of duct tape and prayers. So, I built a new one, clean, secure, scalable, and I did it through my own LLC, Cole Systems LLC, which had technically been on our vendor ledger for years, listed under Ops Architecture and Platform Integration. No one noticed when the invoice changed slightly. No one blinked when I submitted a statement of work that routed licensing rights to my LLC, not the company. I was Viron's head of operations, but I was also Cole Systems' sole proprietor, and no one, especially not Caitlin or her father CEO Richard Mercer, read the legalese about revocation of rights upon improper dismissal of key personnel. It passed through legal like a lukewarm fart in a meeting, rubber stamped, filed, and completely forgotten. The clause was elegant in its simplicity. If the company terminated me without formal review and documented cause, the perpetual license would self-revoke instantaneously. No lawsuit, no messy arbitration, just lights out for the entire infrastructure. Now, was it petty? Maybe. Was it legal? Oh, hell yes. Is it visible to anyone not looking with a microscope? Absolutely not. Caitlin never suspected a thing. She was too busy optimizing culture with wellness initiatives, meditation rooms, and Slack emojis. The day I finalized the contract, she was doing an Instagram Live about her morning gratitude ritual. Meanwhile, I was buying digital insurance that could implode her entire fake kingdom. I tested the clause on a sandbox repo first, ran it through simulation with our external counsel, not a flicker of a red flag. Everything checked out, all signatures clean. Even the compliance team, God bless their overworked souls, logged it into the licensing repository like it was just another vendor line item. That is the thing about being quiet. People assume you're harmless. They forget that the quiet ones build the walls they're standing on. After that, I printed one copy, just one, stored it in a fireproof safe in my attic, along with my grandmother's will and the deed to my car. The digital version was AES 256 encrypted and backed up twice. One in a secure drive in Iceland, the other on a flash drive hidden in a lipstick case in my desk drawer. I didn't want to use it. Let's be clear. I liked my job. I didn't love the politics, the nepotism, or the way Caitlin treated vendor invoices like her personal ATM. But I loved the systems, the people, and the thrill of building something that worked flawlessly. But every time Caitlin smiled with those bleached veneers and called me Larry Beam in meetings like I was her emotional support assistant, I felt the trigger twitch, and when I caught her deleting Slack messages about budget reallocation, I knew the countdown had begun. The thing about clauses like 12.7b, they are quiet bombs. Nobody hears the tick until it is too late. And the best part, that clause wasn't buried under jargon or hidden behind NDAs. It was right there in plain English. One paragraph titled Reversion of Use License Upon Improper Termination. It might as well have been labeled Push This Button if you're dumb enough to fire me without reading. So when HR handed me that $50 juice card and an off-brand sweatshirt and told me we're streamlining operations, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled and thought, activate clause. Caitlin floated into Viron like she'd been airlifted from a lifestyle influencer's Pinterest board. Designer tote, daily affirmations, and the confidence of someone who had never had a performance review in her life. No resume, no track record. just a press release announcing her as Chief Culture Officer, a role with all the authority and none of the accountability. Nepotism royalty cloaked in pastel blazers and buzzwords. She took over the second floor with scented candles and framed quotes about radical alignment. Then she took aim at me. It started with the little things. My monthly ops reports would be accidentally left off meeting agendas. My name was removed from key Slack threads. Budget approvals were routed to new culture committees that somehow all included her friends from yoga. I'd walk into a strategy session and find my seat missing. Literally, someone had wheeled it out into the hallway. Caitlin didn't attack directly. That would have required a spine. No, her weapons were passive aggression and vague jargon, two things she wielded like a toddler with a glitter glue stick. If I raised a concern in a meeting, she'd say, "Let's reframe that energy." Or worse, I think Lawrence's perspective is rooted in a scarcity mindset. I was trying to keep the damn company solvent while she was billing a $900 team connection ceremony that was just a drum circle in the break room. The vendetta was clear. I made her insecure. My competence was a mirror she couldn't crack. Every time I calmly pointed out a flaw in her latest initiative, like the employee empowerment stipend that was just a Venmo transfer to her college roommate for motivational stickers, she'd get this tight smile, nod like I was cute, and say something like, "Lawrence brings an important legacy lens to things." A legacy lens like I was a fax machine that somehow still functioned. So, I started documenting everything. Every deleted Slack message, every accidental double payment to her wellness vendors, every payroll anomaly, especially the time 42s went out to someone listed as an emotional environment consultant, who, upon digging, turned out to be a DJ from Coachella. I created folders, color-coded, time-stamped, and backed up to 2 separate cloud drives under fake project names. I even screen-recorded one call where she referred to layoffs as emotional recalibrations and suggested we offset the morale hit by handing out succulents, but I didn't escalate. Not yet. Brenda, our HR manager, invited me to mediation. Just a quick sit-down with Caitlin, she chirped, to realign communication styles. I smiled, a large one, the kind that makes HR sweat. "Oh, I am aligned," I said. "I'm just not compatible with delusion." Caitlin didn't want alignment. She wanted erasure, and I could see it happening in real time, the way she'd slowly overwrite my contributions with her own PR gloss. In the company blog, she'd talk about streamlining our vendor architecture like she was the one who renegotiated the fulfillment contracts. She even started taking credit for the very platform backend. My claws would soon snap away like a mousetrap on a manicured finger. One afternoon, she walked past my desk with her phone to her ear and said loudly, "Yeah, Lawrence is great at keeping the trains running, but it's time for conductors who know where we're going." I stared at my screen, smiling so hard my jaw hurt because the train she was driving was headed for a cliff, and I had the deed to the tracks. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday when I found the smoking gun. I'd been combing through the Q4 bonus allocation ledger because something smelled off, like rotting oranges behind a cabinet. We were under budget, yet the performance bonuses were short, real short, like we value you in theory, but not enough to pay you short. I clicked into the raw disbursement logs, cross-referenced against payroll, and cross-referenced again against project closeout reports, and then I saw it, a series of transfers labeled Event Coordination Ops Celebration. The amount was $18,750, and the recipient was Caitlin Mercer's personal account. I blinked, thought maybe this is some placeholder name, a vendor we've onboarded through a personal account. It happens. Dumb, but happens. I pulled the vendor invoice ID. Nothing in the vendor system. Nothing logged in our billing software. Nothing but a line item with a fake vendor code and a timestamp 3 days before our Q4 bonus notifications were delayed due to compliance review. I clicked through the finance system's audit log. Caitlin had manually overridden the bonus allocations to ops, diverted them to this ghost event, and transferred the funds to herself, labeling it as an employee enrichment initiative. An initiative where she enriched herself. Classic. Under California Corporations Code Section 309, corporate officers must perform their duties in good faith and with a degree of care that an ordinarily prudent person would use. Diverting employee bonuses for personal enrichment is a textbook breach of fiduciary duty. I printed the report. I didn't Email it, I didn't save it on the company cloud. I printed it, held it in my hands. I stared at it under the kitchen light like it was a dead rat in a lunchbox. I didn't act, didn't call legal, didn't blast an email or post a Slack nuke like a rookie. Instead, I slipped it into a folder labeled petty cash and set it on my bookshelf. Let it marinate because I knew the sword was coming. This just confirmed the hilt was polished. The next morning, I was called into a quick sync with Brenda from HR. Brenda's office smelled like lavender and cowardice. Caitlin was already seated, sipping an oat milk latte. Brenda cleared her throat and read from a printed statement. Lawrence, we've noticed a pattern of interpersonal friction and sustained negativity that is beginning to impact the culture at Viron. As such, executive leadership has decided to move in a different direction. Caitlin nodded solemnly like we were at a funeral for my professionalism. I know this is hard, she added with crocodile tears, but sometimes a fresh start is a blessing in disguise. I stared at her for a full 5 seconds, just long enough to make her shift in her ergonomic chair. Then I stood. No fight, no protest, just calm. Do I need to sign anything? I asked Brenda. She panicked. Oh, we'll follow up with a digital exit packet. No immediate signatures required. Good. That was how I knew they skipped the legal process. No documentation, no cause, no performance review, just negativity, a vague, cowardly catch-all you toss when your real reason wouldn't hold up in arbitration. I walked out slower this time. Not out of sadness, just control. Back at my car, I opened my laptop tethered to my phone's hotspot. I dragged 2 files into an encrypted folder. The first was Caitlin's bonus theft report. The second was Clause 12.7b trigger PDF. I attached the first to an email addressed to Sarah Jenkins, my attorney, with the subject Caitlin's Bachelorette Fund. The second I uploaded to a private repository under my LLC's account. No need for revenge speeches, just cold documentation and a clock quietly ticking. Ghosting a company isn't like ghosting an ex. With an ex, you delete the photos, block the number, maybe cry into a pint of ice cream. With a company, it's cleaner, more surgical. You remove your fingerprints from the glass and let their own greasy mess come into focus. I didn't update LinkedIn. I didn't post some fake optimistic onto the next chapter goodbye. No rage post, no cryptic subtweets, just disappeared. And let me tell you, nothing unnerves a toxic workplace more than silence. I didn't even tell the engineers I mentored. The junior PM who used to ask me if her roadmap made sense messaged once, and I left it on red. That was not my circus anymore. Behind the scenes, Monolith Capital started due diligence for the Series B. $50,000 was on the table, and suddenly every spreadsheet, every process map, and every vendor agreement I'd ever touched was under a magnifying glass. Except now there was no me. No ops whisperer to explain why Vendor 6A has a 72-hour lead time. No one to decode the maze of invoice routing I'd built to prevent fraud and contain Caitlin. I watched from afar, eyes dry, coffee hot. First, the finance team sent a corrected revenue projection off by $1,300,000. They tried to blame software delays, but the truth was simpler. They never learned the 2-step audit process I'd built because I didn't give them the playbook. You don't hand blueprints to people building your guillotine. Then came the tech unraveling. 3 microservices collapsed. The DevOps contractor whom Caitlin insisted we hire after one vision board session together couldn't troubleshoot it because the back-end schema had my naming conventions, not hers. I documented everything thoroughly, but in my LLC's repository, not the company's. Clause 12.7b made sure of that. Caitlin, of course, went on a communication offensive. In the weekly leadership video, she called it a growth recalibration phase and said the team was reclaiming operational sovereignty. That is corporate code, for we have no idea what we are doing. Meanwhile, KPIs slipped like ice on tile. Vendor agreements were missed. Onboarding timelines doubled. Customers began tweeting. The trust started leaking. Caitlin blamed culture resistance. She said this in a Slack town hall while wearing a sweatshirt that read "Do the work," which made me snort coffee out of my nose. HR tried damage control, spinning it as a legacy architecture issue. But legacy architecture wasn't the problem. I was the architecture, and they'd fired me without checking the floor plan. Every missed deadline was a crack. Every investor inquiry about back-end reliability was a sledgehammer. And every time Caitlin opened her mouth, she shoved a little more dynamite into her dad's company. Monolith Capital's analysts weren't idiots. They asked questions, and when the answers were vague, inconsistent, or routed through 3 different departments with no clear owner, they started highlighting things. Literally yellow highlighter on every missing process document, every incomplete integration, and every contract that referenced tools they no longer had access to. I imagined the boardroom smelled like tension and sugar-free energy drinks. Meanwhile, I was baking banana bread. That was what I remembered most about that week. The calm, the soft whir of my mixer, the way sunlight came in sideways around 3 p.m., and how satisfying it was to not be in the fire while still holding the matchbook. Caitlin never reached out directly, but I noticed a weird uptick in views on my old tech posts. A couple of my code snippets on GitHub got pinged from Vyron IP addresses. My LLC website got 6 new visits from Palo Alto in 2 days, and still I said nothing. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let the wrong people talk long enough to bury themselves. And Caitlin was practically handing out shovels. It was a Thursday, exactly 1 week before Vyron's big investor pitch to Monolith Capital, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi, is this Lawrence Cole?" I didn't recognize the voice, but the tone was all salt and starch. "This is Alan Brewster, outside counsel for Vyron. I was hoping to ask if you might be open to consulting on a few time-sensitive vendor matters. Nothing official, of course, just light guidance." His voice had that uptight lawyer edge. I let the silence drag. "I appreciate the call, Alan, but I'm not available for informal anything," I said. He stumbled a bit. "We are in final pitch prep and certain items you previously managed have gaps." That was cute. I didn't ask which gaps. I knew the automated vendor flow system I built through my LLC was undocumented for them. The workaround I installed to prevent fulfillment delays was also undocumented because I had warned them months ago that knowledge management doesn't happen by osmosis. But they let me go without a handoff plan because Caitlin thought culture was more important than competence. Alan thanked me anyway and hung up. That night, I poured a glass of scotch and pulled the Mila folder from the back of my filing cabinet. Inside was 1 sheet of paper, crisp weighted stock, my LLC's letterhead, dated and notarized. Title: Formal Notification of Clause Activation. Clause 12.7b. Due to my termination without cause, review, or formal documentation, this letter serves as official notice that exclusive licensing rights to the back-end infrastructure have been revoked in accordance with Clause 12.7b of the signed agreement between Vyron Inc. and Cole Systems, LLC. Access is no longer authorized as of the timestamp of this letter's receipt. I slid it into a certified envelope addressed to every board member, the CEO included. No email, no CC, no just following up. Paper, tangible, legal, undeniable. Then I booked a courier to hand-deliver it to Vyron's office first thing in the morning. I knew what would happen next. First confusion, then panic. Then the frantic boardroom meeting where someone blurts, "Wait, what the hell is Clause 12.7b? Caitlin would scoff and say it is probably nothing. But Alan Brewster would know. He'd read it. By the time that letter hit the boardroom table, he'd remember exactly that the clause was enforceable. I hadn't just signed that clause, I'd registered the IP ownership under Cole Systems, LLC. I had time-stamped code check-ins, license keys, and documentation trails. The moment they fired me without cause, that clause became live, triggered. They could still try to demo the product at the pitch, but now they would be showing off a car whose engine had just been repossessed. The boardroom was all glass and hubris, 27 stories up, with a panoramic view of the bay. It was Vyron's big day, the Series B pitch with Monolith Capital. $50,000 was on the table, and Caitlin was dressed for the coronation. Cream blazer, designer heels, and her PowerPoint loaded with flash animations. "Thank you for joining us," she purred. "At Vyron, we don't just build platforms, we architect trust." The presentation rolled on with graphs, projections, and buzzwords stacked like a Jenga tower: scalable empathy, culture-forward architecture, emotional throughput. No mention of product stability or the back-end stack. Caitlin clicked to a slide titled The Next Chapter. "We've positioned ourselves to triple ARR in the next 18 months through strategic partnerships and proprietary system leverage." That was when Edward Vance, the lead investor from Monolith Capital, slowly opened his diligence folder. I watched from the back row. Yes, I was there. Edward had insisted I come as a technical consultant to represent Cole Systems LLC, the owner of the back-end infrastructure. The Viron board, too flustered to think long-term, had agreed. Caitlin hadn't been told until this morning. Based on the way she flinched when she saw me, I think her soul tried to exit through her pores. Edward Vance flipped through the folder, page by page. He didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. Caitlin launched into team cohesion, smiling too wide, her hands waving around in the air. That was when her phone lit up. 12 missed calls, all from legal. She blinked, paused, and her voice wobbled as she continued, "And we believe our culture is our moat." Edward Vance held up a hand. "Before we go further, can we clarify something?" he said, calm as a surgeon. Caitlin froze. "Of course." Edward pulled out a printed termination memo. My termination memo. This document states that Lawrence Cole was terminated for negativity and misalignment with culture. Was this termination reviewed by internal counsel? Caitlin's mouth opened, then closed. CEO Richard Mercer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Edward turned to the second page. "This is a letter from Cole Systems LLC dated last week, notifying Viron of the activation of Clause 12.7b. Caitlin's knuckles went white on the edge of the conference table. Edward continued, "Viron's right to deploy the back-end suite is contingent upon the continued employment of Lawrence Cole. Firing him without documented cause triggers immediate revocation of the software license. If Viron continues to run the platform, they are in direct violation of federal copyright law under 17 U.S.C. Section 106. Edward looked around the table, his eyes locking onto the CEO. "Meaning, when you terminated Lawrence, you didn't just fire your head of ops. You terminated the license to your core infrastructure. You no longer own your back-end systems. The API logic, the customer data pipes, the vendor stack, the very thing this platform runs on no longer belongs to Viron." The general counsel stood up so fast his chair hit the glass partition. His skin was sheet white. "Where did this get signed?" he whispered. "I drafted it myself," I said from the back row. "Your department signed off during the vendor consolidation last year." Edward Vance looked at the CEO. "Without this license, you have no legal right to operate the product you're pitching, meaning every single investor here is being shown vaporware." Silence. Thick, choking silence filled the room. The CTO buried his face in his hands. The VP of sales walked to the window. The pitch Caitlin had rehearsed for weeks collapsed in a matter of minutes. Edward Vance didn't slam the papers. He slid them slow and deliberate across the glass table. "Congratulations," he said coldly. "You just lost your company." Caitlin tried to scream about culture and morale, but no one was listening. Edward Vance stood, walked to the glass doors, paused, looked over his shoulder at me, gave a nod, and walked out. He left $50,000. Zerone and Vapor and board members holding the bag. The boardroom erupted into shouting. Caitlin spun toward the board, but they were already screaming at each other. The CFO looked like he was about to throw up. I stood quietly, walked slowly toward the door, and as I passed the trash can, I tossed the Viron sweatshirt in. Outside, my phone buzzed. A new email from Edward Vance with the subject, "Let's talk, acquisition of Cole Systems LLC. Your terms." I exhaled long and slow. When someone tries to erase your legacy with a $50 gift card, there's only one response. Build something they can't replace and let the silence do the rest.